As Arkansas's population grows, so do our energy demands. But with the right mix of resources, reliable, affordable power will always be a reality. These resources are all around us in our rivers, blowing through our trees, even right below our feet. The answer isn't focusing on one resource, it's embracing them all. The electric cooperatives of Arkansas know that a balanced approach to power builds our communities and powers our dreams. Visit themixmatters.com and see why there's power in knowledge.
Well, first of all, Curtis, thank you so much for sitting down with us, and we appreciate you doing the interview. Tell me a little bit, why do you think you're a better candidate for the Republican nomination than Asa Hutchinson?
Well, I think we've reached a place in Arkansas where we need a businessman at the helm of state government. And I think it's important to define what that means. I mean, a lot of people invest in companies, or will put some money in a company, but they don't run the day-to-day operations. And then not only did I do that, have I done that as a businessman, but I actually risk everything we had in our company, which is really typical of a lot of Arkansas small businessmen and women. And I by experience, I know what it's like to go home on Friday night convinced that your company's not going to survive till Monday morning, or get to Friday and have a payroll you have to meet and not have the money to do it, and scrambling around trying to make sure you can pay your employees. And just the angst and the agony of wondering and giving everything you've got and working 100 hours a week to manage the company, to keep it going, and even to keep it going when everybody around you is convinced it's not going to make it, but you are.
But that makes you a better candidate for governor. And in his defense, Asa Hutchinson has started a business too. He's got a law practice that seems to be fairly successful.
Yeah, and I give him that. But I think what I've been through and where I've lived as a businessman is more typical of where most Arkansas small businessmen and women are living. And I understand by personal experience that the illustration I like to use is kind of like, I can talk about what it's like to start a business and run a business. If I've never done it, it's kind of like me telling a mother how to have a baby. She knows I don't know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to know what I'm talking about when it comes to having a baby. So I think it's similar. I wouldn't begin to say that starting and operating and keeping a business alive is as agonizing as having a baby. But nevertheless, I think the metaphor is there. And I think I'm very sensitive to regulations and statutes and government actions that inhibit business. And I think I'm going to bring a super sensitivity to that as I move through my administration. And I think we're in a place now where we need that kind of sensitivity. And we need a governor who understands when a small business owner begins to talk about what's hurting him and how it's hurting him and why it's hurting him. Somebody can say, yeah, man, do I know that? Do I understand that? Have I felt that? I think that's a remarkable difference.
Well, and you, as part of your, I think, political philosophy, you are definitely against government intervention on a lot of different fronts in terms of regulation, in terms of government interference and barriers to businesses. Yet the business that you're primarily known for, Safe Foods Corporation, was started with research that came out of a government operation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that there were government loans that probably helped seed that company as well as your own private investments. I mean, where does government have a place in all that?
Well, actually, it's a really good point, because sometimes when I talk about government's interference in business, people think I'm anti-regulation, and I'm not. I like yellow stripes on highways. I like stop signs, I like traffic lights when they're necessary. So it's not a matter of anti-regulation, it's a matter of hyper or over-regulation. It's the very tendency of business, of government, it's the very nature of government to expand and grow. And that's because a lot of people who get in government are service-oriented and service-minded, and they get in government because they want to solve problems. But sometimes in the process of solving a problem, government becomes the problem. Our company did begin out of a discovery made by the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences that a compound in scope mouth rinse was more effective at controlling salmonella on chicken. Of course, chicken's an important product here in Arkansas. And then Safe Foods was able to secure a line of credit, an $8 million line of credit, because of a guarantee from the Arkansas Development and Finance Authority. I think those are legitimate functions of state government, and I've never objected to them at all. And of course, I made those decisions because as a fiduciary for my company and my investors, I'm obligated to make the very best decisions I can for my company and my investors. As governor, you assume a different fiduciary role, where now you're obligated to make the best decisions for Arkansas taxpayers. In the process, though, of getting our company started, we found we were regulated by the FDA, the EPA, the USDA. These were federal bureaucracies. And we also discovered they don't get along. In fact, a little company like ours becomes something like a hockey puck. And they use us to battle over turf and money and budget and authority. And that was enormously frustrating. And I will tell you, it's by the grace of God, our company survived that process. And what I've discovered, Roby, is that for every company like ours that goes through the process, our company survived, there are probably 1,000 who don't. And if the concern had been in the bureaucracies, really food safety, if the concern had been concern for you, I would have felt differently about it, but that's not what I saw there.
Mm-hmm. And that's what shaped your political philosophy in
a lot
terms
of
of
it,
that
yes.
regulation. So let's focus to, again, just one last question on this front of you as a businessman, because it is what you are claiming is your best credential
Yes.
for being governor of Arkansas. How successful were you as CEO of Safe Foods Corporation when you put it in perspective?
Well, I think if you look at the company today, and I think it's important to understand the context, I mean, the company today is enormously successful. It's one of the most exciting stories of business in Arkansas. Now doing business on 4 continents. Safe Foods treats, I understand, parts of 300 million meals a day. The mission for the company that we established was to help make the world's food supply safer. We're actually doing that now on 4 continents. And it was at the point where I retired from the company began to really take off. And people look at that and say,
correlation there?
yeah, well, there is. People say, well, gosh, it didn't take off till he left. I wouldn't have left if I didn't know the company was at that point. In fact, in my last board of directors meeting, I said to them, okay, guys, this thing is ready to fly. It's ready to go. Everything's in place. And it's important to understand all of the management team that's at Safe Foods today were all people I recruited. Everybody there was people I recruited in the company. The CEO today, I recruited into the company. I chose him to be my successor. We agreed on the strategy he would execute before I retired. All of the intellectual property, I mean, Safe Foods is an intellectual property company. We now own patents and trademarks in more than 90 jurisdictions worldwide. All of those were acquired while I was the CEO. Every regulatory approval or fundamental regulatory approval on which the company is now able to operate were all accomplished while I was the CEO. Almost every international market that the company is functioning in was open while I was the CEO. So all that foundation that took all those years to build and establish all occurred while I was there. And so I look at the success of the company with enormous satisfaction, and I'm thrilled that it's doing well.
You'd have been happier if that success had come a little bit sooner too.
I would have been a lot
I
happier.
know it was a long process for you.
Would have been less of a hole to dig out of.
Let's talk tax cuts. This has been a fundamental kind of plank of what you want to do as governor of the state of Arkansas. Is you want to see a massive kind of rethinking of the tax brackets, the tax system in the state of Arkansas, the tax rates. I was on the campaign trail with you earlier today. You told a group that you've been told this is kind of a radical idea, and you don't think it's that radical. Why not go more radical? Why not, if you want to see the income tax eliminated, why not eliminate the income tax?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is because I think there's a responsible way to do the right thing. And secondly, the fact is that politics is the art of the possible. And what I'm proposing that's been called radical, actually not very much, it's just been a couple of times I've heard the phrase, basically I think just moves Arkansas up to something of a level playing field with our neighboring states. I mean, we have one of the highest capital gains. We have the highest capital gains tax rate in the region. We have the highest corporate tax rates in the region. We have one of the highest state income tax rates in the region. Those all are inhibiting the prosperity of Arkansans and the growth of business in Arkansas. What I'm proposing just kind of moves us up almost, but not quite level. And we're with our neighboring states, and we're competing with them for good jobs and good paid businesses. I would love to eliminate state income tax. And I would love to eliminate all the taxes I've described that keep us from being a prosperous state. But I also know that there is a responsible way to do that. And while we lower taxes in Arkansans, we've got to have a system for raising and better jobs and creating a broader base of revenue in the state. And those work in tandem, they work in synchronization. And I think one of the reasons my plan is unique is because I'm not only calling for a reduction of state income tax on Arkansas taxpayers, but I'm proposing a way to attract and build a small business, what I call a small business magnet in Arkansas, because small business is the job creating engine of the economy. I think Arkansas is sitting on prime small business real estate here. And I think if we create a different tax environment and a different regulatory environment in Arkansas, I think we can attract an enormous number of new small businesses to Arkansas.
You talk about that whole balance there, though, of cutting taxes. You got to maintain some level of state revenue so that you can balance a budget and provide for the government services that Arkansans do need. Now, I've heard you say, too, that while I know you have some plans for education reform,
Yes.
but you're not going to touch education spending in a way that's going to jeopardize maybe the Lakeview decision, for instance. But what would you cut in state government if you saw things out of kilter, if you saw things out of whack? Where would you kind of go first to shore up or streamline state government in terms of cutting that expense?
Well, that's a good question. And the honest answer is I got to get inside and look a little harder to understand where we can. As a CEO, I know I could say to my company and all my department heads, I want you to cut overhead by 1% next year. And I believe we can do that in Arkansas without affecting any of the programs, any of the services, even any of the employees that we have in state government. I think we can do a 1% cut in the overhead cost of operating the agencies that report to the governor. Doing that, you just cut $50 million out of our operating budget. That's the first thing I want to do. Then give me a year, that first year, let's cut $50 million just with a simple 1% reduction across the board. Then give me a year to dig in and take a real hard look at all the agencies that report to the governor. And I think, based on my discussions with people inside government today and some department heads inside government today, and I'm not going to disclose their names for their own sake, but I think we can achieve at least efficiencies that'll cut the cost of government by $300 to $400 million a year without reducing services to Arkansans. I think it's there. I think we can do it. And how we're going to do it and where we're going to do it is going to take some real intense study.
Well, and the same criticisms that have been leveled at Asa Hutchinson and Mike Ross on their tax reform proposals is that they're too vague and there's not a timeline for this. I mean, that same criticism could be applied to what you've just described to me. It's give me the keys to state government and I'll figure it out if you elect me.
Well, it could be.
Give me one. I mean, you've been around state government enough. Give me one particular department or agency that you think, I know that there's something to be cut there.
Well, I'll tell you one place I would start and look very intensely would be Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. I think we can make significant cuts in ADEQ. And I think we can do that in a way that enables Arkansas businesses to function more profitably with a lot less red tape. And I think we can reduce the overhead of ADEQ and at the same time let Arkansas businesses function with a little more freedom and liberty and therefore more profitability. That's one of the places I'd start looking. And I'm also aware that all the agencies, let me be careful in characterizing all, but I know that it's a common practice to have placeholders in agencies for employees that are never hired and never filled, but there's a budget and there's expense there. Let's take a look at those. Let's take a look at those processes. And I think, somebody said, where are you going to cut? And I think, frankly, we can probably cut everywhere. And that's my intent, because I think that there are processes where there's an effort to protect budgets, because in the current process we use is we take the budget from last year and try to get more money and build on it. Let's start with a business-like approach where we do performance-based budgeting. Let's do zero balance budgeting. And let's also do something where we start defining what success looks like for every agency in state government. Not all the agencies do that. Not all the agencies have a mission statement. It's like, if you start out, if you don't know where you're going, you never know when you arrive. And I think if we start defining what the purpose of these agencies is, the purpose of these agencies are, I think we're going to start finding things that we don't want to keep doing.
You've been a very vocal opponent of the private option. Yes. Would you push as governor to repeal it altogether? I mean, would you ask for legislation to be filed? Would you push for that to happen?
I will push for the repeal of the private option.
What if that's not the will of the legislature?
Well, if we don't do it, then we'll live with it and we'll figure out a way to make it work and manage it. I think that there's going to be an excellent opportunity to repeal the private option in the next session.
Because of what you think the makeup of the legislature will be?
Because I think the legislature is going to be more conservative than it's been. I think they're going to be more Republicans, but I think they're going to be more conservatives in the legislature than we've had in the past. And my whole objection to the private option is I'm very concerned about Arkansans who don't have health insurance. I think there's a better way to get it to them, and I think the private sector is a better delivery vehicle.
The private option is a private sector delivery vehicle.
Well, and It was in some respects, but in the process of funding it, what we did was we exacerbated the expense of it by doing two things. We dramatically increased the number of people in Arkansas who qualified for Medicaid supplements by at least 50%. We also moved it over to the federal government, which we know the process there costs more than if it were state administered. So we increased the overall cost, and I think we're looking at the best numbers I've seen, Roby, that when Arkansas starts picking up their percentage of the cost, that the projections are that the percentage, although only 10%, may be more than the whole amount we were paying in the past. And I'm really concerned about where we're headed here. But fundamentally, if I could say this quickly, what I believe we need to do is, if we'll create the new job opportunities that I'm talking about, instead of putting more people on Medicaid, I want to create an economy where fewer people need Medicaid. That's the objective, and I think anytime you grow the government so dramatically and increase the size of government so dramatically as the private option does, you take the economy in the exactly wrong direction.
Well, that still kind of comes back to the whole tax cut, revenue growth equation too, is if you want to grow jobs for private sector health insurance and cut back on this government subsidized health insurance, it still has to keep some sort of equilibrium there. I mean,
it does, and that's what management's all about. And that's why I'm asking Arkansans to hire me to be the CEO, because I've been doing that for many years, and I understand the process. And there's a responsible way to do it. And I will tell you that I think there'll be a managing process and a balancing process as we go year to year. And some years we're going to be able to do more than we thought, other years less. And because there's going to be circumstances outside of our control from the national economy to global events. And all of those things are going to affect how we manage as we go forward. But I think we've got to understand, when you set priorities and you set goals and they give you a target and you move toward those goals and you move toward that target, understanding that sometimes you'll move 2 steps and sometimes none. But a lot of people think that success looks like this. And Roby, you know that success doesn't look like that.
It looks like this.
It goes like this, and it goes like this, and then it goes here. And that's how we're going to have to do state government.
You're in a unique position. You have a lot of support from what a lot of folks would call Tea Party conservatives in the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been in a little bit of a civil war over the last couple of election cycles with conservatives and ultra-conservatives and any other way you want to slice and define them. What do you think of this supposed rift in the Republican Party? Is it a united party, or do you see the schism that's there?
I see the schism. I don't think it's as significant or as broad as some people think it is. In fact, I'm sometimes described as the Tea Party candidate, which I'm thrilled to have that label, because I like what I see the Tea Party stand for. But I will tell you, as I travel the state, I have a tremendous amount of support from grassroots Republicans. In fact, we have campaign committees functioning in 60 of Arkansas' 75 counties. And in almost all of those teams that we've got, we call them Team Coleman, and almost all those teams all over the state, the majority of my team members are also members of the local Republican county committee. So the grassroots Republican in Arkansas is a Coleman supporter.
If the Republicans, though, in terms of governing at the state legislature, even at the congressional level, if they continue to moderate, which seems to be where the schism occurs, people that are meeting in the middle versus people that are standing for a principle and not budging, not bending, is it ultimately something that can't be healed, something that can't be come together? Or do you see the Republican Party always finding a way to coalesce after these really harsh kind of internal battles?
Yeah, I think the Republican Party is going to coalesce.
You don't think the Tea Party splits off at some point in time, becomes its own movement?
I'm not qualified to speak for the Tea Party, I will tell you, but no, I don't
just
think
your
so.
observation.
I think the Tea Party understands that their most effective course of action is to have more influence in the Republican Party. And I think that's where they're going to land and what they're going to do. They understand that. And these are intelligent people and intelligent political people. And I think they understand that the best opportunity for them to see their principles and ideologies prevail is going to be more influential inside the party.
You told Asa Hutchinson at a debate earlier in the week that you would support him if he's the nomination. You didn't ask him if he'd support you if you get the nomination.
He actually began the process. I don't know if you heard the question, but he said, Curtis, if you're the nominee, I'm going to support you. And so it seemed a little redundant or inappropriate for me to say, okay, now if I win, are you going to support me? When he began the question by making that statement. And so, no, I didn't ask him, but he began the whole process by saying, if you're the nominee, I'm going to support you.